It's Friday, and I'm back with the next in our Fanzine Friday series. Today we're taking a look at the Beholder number 12. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer. This is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Each week on the Fanzine Friday series, I take a fanzine from my collection off the shelf for a closer look. And today, from March of 1980, this is the Beholder number 12. Hope you enjoy the video. So today we're taking a look at this fanzine that came out in 1980 in March. It's heavy stock cover, regular paper stapled down the side. My old version's green, which you can't see because of the green screen. Here, take a look at the art on the front cover. This is not labeled, but I'm pretty sure this is Guy Duke's art. And you can see it a little better here as we blow it up. Just some funky looking bald-headed dude. He is holding some type of bird like a falcon or a hawk. He's got the cover on it. And he's also got this weird little, looks like a whip, I think, he's carrying along. Let's talk about what's inside. We have a really short editorial. Monster Summoning is back. This is like classic Beholder stuff. It's got really good articles in it. Monster Summoning, Water Witchcraft, New Magic Items, a Chronicle, which is a discussion about playing through the city-state of the Invincible Overlord from Judges Guild. Variations on a theme, which are some ideas for playing your campaign. A review, article on Assassin Disguise, like some alternate rules are proposed. Death Test, which is the dungeon, this time from an outside contributor. Info, people looking for games, looking for people to play in different campaigns, etc. Short article for Traveler, and developing campaigns, some suggestions for the Dungeon Master. Again, Mike Stoner, Guy Duke, principally responsible. John Phillips, Bell and Graham Staplehurst each have a contribution, which we'll talk about when we get there. Here's our cover. Remember, at this point, the original printing here is 45 pence. Then there's a 50 pence, 55, don't have a copy of that, and then the 60 pence version. Editorial's really short this time, the traditional stuff about how to get a hold of them, mentioning back issues 1 through 5 they have, and 6 and 7 will be coming along shortly. And here's some cool artwork. There's a signature down here at the bottom I don't recognize, but they don't tell us who that is. But anyway, this like funky candle that's got a ghost face in it, and then there's like a ghost drifting around behind the candle as well. First thing up is Monster Summoning, one of the typical things here in the Beholder fanzine. Our first creature, we'll take a closer look at that here, is the Barakiki, and a strange creature that has just two long legs and goes along the top of a dungeon or cavern, somewhere, something like that. And they just hang there. And then when a party comes by that they decide they're going to attack, they basically hold their head up against the top of the ceiling, they let go, and then centrifugal force swings down, and this beak-like head smashes into you. They say it hits you sort of like a bowling ball being dropped from a string, and that force is going to crack you for 1 to 6 points of, or 1 to 4 points of damage, or they might also bite you for 1 to 6 points of damage. And that's it. They just sort of hang around the dungeon, and then they might attack you. Our second creature here is the Ambula, like ambulate, I guess, and a descendant of terrible lizards. I think that's the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and you can kind of see him here with some hairy legs. They sort of look like a Tyrannosaurus Rex a little bit, right, except for a little chunkier. And the main thing that's sort of unique about them is that their body hardens over time. You can sort of see the rock-like scales on that body. And they start off, and then their armor class, which is 5, gets harder. So then it gets to turn armor class 4, and then 3, and then it goes backwards, back to 4, back to 5. It can hold that armor class of 3 for 8 melee rounds before it goes back down. So by then the combat's probably over. They can bite you for 1 to 6 points of damage. They can rend you with the claws, and then they can smack you with their tail. And they can do their little claws and their feet claws, so they have all kinds of attack options. Similar to the creature on the hanging from the ceiling, this guy's called the Bowler. He's kind of a slime pile that has these arms with these really, big boulders, if you will, or bowling balls on him, and he can swing that along and get some rhythm going and smack you upside the head with it for 1 to 8 points of damage. The body secretes a fluid that'll corrode metal. In their version of this, it's different than the rust monster. Every hit takes a point off your armor class as it slightly corrodes the metal that it hits. They don't say anything about whether striking it with a weapon would have a similar effect on your swords, mace, whatever. So I think that would be up to the dungeon master. As drafted, the secretions are only coming out of the sort of the bowling ball there at the end of their arms. And also their gushy, squishy nature means they don't take any damage from blunt weapons, only piercing or cutting weapons. The next creature is the QWERTY, a two-headed reptile considered holy by some religions. The QWERTY is intelligent. It considers itself to be a unique creature, and so even if it ever sees another one of its kind, it will assume it's an illusion because they're sort of, I guess they're full of themselves and they think they're unique. A creature that should be worshipped, kind of thing, is the view they have of themselves. They can do some damage from their bites and their claws, and they have the ability to cast a charm person or haste twice a day, as if they were a 10th level magic user. And then we have these crazy looking little guys, which are called Chelix, and this was a race of humanoids that migrated into the north and evolved there, and now they have white fur and light blue skin. And apparently there were Chelix with a K was the generic term for them. There were 3 tribes, and this tribe, which is called the Chelix instead of the Kelix, I guess, defeated the other 2 tribes, completely wiped them out, and now only the Chelix remain. And they're basically humanoids with some unique abilities. Obviously, they live in the cold. They won't leave those climates voluntarily. And then they have just a description, the more that are present, you get stronger and stronger ones, and maybe even get a sort of chieftain in the group. And they encourage you at the end here, there's a note, to send in your articles and your monsters to be part of the future, changes here or additions of the beholder. Now this is all united around this theme of water witchcraft, right? So all these things have some connection to the water. The first one, the Conch of Scylla, I think, is a 6-inch pure white conch shell, 2 powers, 1 to 4 turns each. It can create the sound of running water, or it can create sort of the sound of like a nymph or a siren or a harpy, a charming sound. And you can be heard within 240 feet, 240 yards outdoors. If you hear the singing sound, then if you don't pass your saving throw, you will be compelled to come towards that sound. The next is Sepia of the Giant Squid, Nautilus. And so this is a good one. This is black ink taken from a 100-foot-long squid nautilus by a mage Atlanta. And he mixed it together. It's enchanted and has some special properties, very valuable to the magic user. Lowers the chance of making a mistake in scribing a scroll or copying a spell. Lowers the time by half because it's really good ink. The most powerful aspect, though, is when it is read from the scroll, it'll only partially fade, and so it basically allows you to read a scroll twice before the ink completely disappears. So there you go. And this next one is the only one. There's some background drawings here, but the thing that's really noticeable in this large drawing to me is the staff of the crab. So it's this wooden staff with this crab carved on the end of it, and it can just hit you normally, just sort of whack you with the wooden part of that, +1 weapon. If you hit with the head of the staff, then the pincers will also snap onto you for 2 to 8 points of damage, and that takes a charge. But it does that extra sort of bonus damage. You can also use the little eye stalks and concentrate, and you can see through those eyes, and as they say, basically to peek around a corner, over a window or something, you can use it to basically take a little peek without sticking your own head out there. And finally, you can summon a giant crab. You'll do D4 to see how many come, and again another D4 to see how many rounds it takes for them to show up. And they'll stick around for 18 melee rounds if they're not already dead, and they'll fight for you or whatever you sort of mentally send the signal out that you want them to do. That staff can be used by magic users, illusionists, and thieves. There's some sand of blinding. You throw it, and it basically sticks to your face and keeps you blind. If you, I would say, don't make a saving throw. 2d10 rounds that you'll be blind. The clam pendant, it's a little silver clam on the end of a little chain, and you would gain the ability to give someone a bear hug for 2d6 points of damage in melee combat. And it has charges that are used every time you give someone the hug, and then once it's charged, it'll crack, and that'll be the end of it. Once the charges are used, it'll crack, and that'll be the end of it. The skin of pure water created from a baby seal, and basically it's enchanted. Anything you put in there turns into purified water. So poison, non-potable water, anything you put in there turns it into water. Pebbles of water divining. There's a bunch of little round pebbles in a bag, and you dump them on the floor, and they'll magically drop in a way that points towards the closest water source. They can only sense water 3 feet deep, so basically it'll take you to a stream or a river more often than a subterranean water source like a well, unless you actually were near one that had an opening to the surface. And again, it doesn't tell you how far it's going to be, and it doesn't anything else about it, right? Whether it's a stagnant pond or a running stream or a giant ocean, it's just the closest source of any water. If the closest source is within 3 feet under you, it'll just form an X, and you basically would dig straight down. Next one is the Cloak of Fishkind. And this is a cloak covered in enchanted fish scales. And you get what they call the sixth sense of fish, which is you can sense movement like a fish would in water, anything on the sides or around you. So anything within 120 feet, 120 yards outside that's moving, you'll feel the movement. The body makes this shockwaves through the air, and you'll feel that very minute change in the air around you, and you'll know there's something over here, something over there. You get some sense maybe of the size, obviously the direction from which the movement is occurring. It's pretty, anyone who uses magic, so I think that means magic users or cleric classes can use this cloak. It's pretty good. It prevents, surprise, it prevents someone from sneaking up on you, that kind of thing. And finally, the Mirror of a Ganopi. This is a cursed item. And a Ganopi, probably mispronouncing that, is a very vain, very powerful and enchanted mermaid who created these mirrors to see herself. And the mirrors are so enchanted that even though now they're scattered and you may have found one, you see her reflection, not your own, when you look into the mirror. If you make a failed save versus magic, you become enchanted and obsessed with finding this mermaid, and you'll get to, go towards the closest source of water, and you will dive in to try and swim down and find her. I think if you have some sense of what direction to go in, but in any event, your character is going to drown, essentially, right, diving into the water to try and go down and find this mermaid. So you better get a remove curse spell cast pretty quickly. All right, now we have a walkthrough narrative of playing through the city-state of the Invincible Overlord. So basically, this is a short recitation of their a little piece of their adventure. So it starts with them paying to come in, a little tax to come into the city, going and finding an inn where they're going to be sleeping in a shared room with some ogres and eating catfish pie for supper. After they get their accommodations set up, they go back out into the city through a market, find the slaves market, don't want to go there. Get away from a sort of brawl in the middle of the street, and in doing so step into some random house where someone basically tells them to leave, and the magic user throws a dagger at the guy because the magic user apparently is testy and upset, and then they all, after hitting this guy with the dagger, they just leave his house and go over into a park, and then the town guards come and they end up in a brief scuffle. They abduct the magic user, who obviously is in trouble for throwing the dagger at this guy. And as they're taking the magic user through the town, they stop at these gates, and the magic user apparently is able to cast a spell, jumping spell, I think, and leaps away, casts a stinking cloud on the guards, and then runs back to the park, finds the party. The party gets out of the park, back into the main street, makes their way back to their inn. It's just sort of a little walkthrough, but gives you a little flavor for the kind of events that you can get into in the city-state of the Invincible Overlord. It's a fantastic supplement, and if you're looking for a city, either as something to use or at least use for inspiration, I think that the old Judges Guild products are fantastic. I've got a whole series of videos looking at products from the early days of Judges Guild, and the city-state of the Invincible Overlord is definitely one of the good ones. Okay, Graham Staplehurst, who's been in some of the other fanzines we've looked at, I recognize that name. It's called Variations on a Theme. It's just his idea of how you can create hundreds of new monsters just by tweaking the monsters that are already in the monster manual, rather than, say, monster summoning ideas that are here in the Beholder, where it's sort of a brand new idea, right? Here are some examples. Primitive trolls are basically like them, except for they're obese, pinky brown in color, regenerate twice as fast, but turn to stone in the presence of sunlight. Only struck by magical weapons. If you hit them without a magical weapon, the weapon will reverberate off of them, and you can likely be stunned for your strength -10 melee rounds. They're sort of like, their bodies are like hard like stone. Wave giants are like stone giants, but they basically live in the water and can't really get out of it for more than one turn at a time. Mercury dragons are like silver dragons. They can turn into a pool of mercury and slide along, get through little cracks and so forth, and basically while they're in that state are very difficult to damage if you even realize that's what they were. Although they do say heat metal can do some damage to the mercury state if they're in the liquid state. The phantom ape is like a carnivorous ape, except for it's undead. And his version has translucent flesh and skin with fiery green eyes. Basically like carnivorous apes, except for they don't bite. And if they do hit you with a claw, they can drain an energy level from your character. Snake skins are like lizard men, but the skin has fine shimmering scales prized for rich women's clothing, and 25% of them have a poisonous bite. They live in swamps. And then the Felatar is a cat-headed relative of the Minotaur, less aggressive, not as strong, with 4+2 hit dice, doesn't butt you in the head, obviously, because it has a cat head. It can use a shield, and some of them are really intelligent and have some spell abilities. So just a few examples of how to use that. There's the pharaoh mummy, which is basically a mummy, but this one's of a pharaoh, and so it's turned more as a specter than a normal mummy. And then they will either have really high level fighting abilities, so like a 9th through 14th level fighter to hit, or they'll have been a cleric and have 7th level, including all the spells of an evil cleric: cause wounds, hold person, bestow curse, those kind of things. An ogre were is an ogre subject to lycanthropy and can change into a large wolfhound and attack you that way as well. And then he has different types of ettins. There's a stone ettin, a frost ettin, a cloud ettin, sort of copying off the giants, right? And then there's the supreme ettin, which is the Jonas ettin, has actually 2 bodies, so it's like they share a spine, so one body's facing this way and the other body's facing the other way, so they can't be surprised. And obviously they have multiple attacks in both directions. And then his piece de resistance here is his multiple types of rats, 22 to be exact. He's got these different names. Some of them have special abilities. Some of them are just basically different types of rats, like the Sumatra rat, 1/2 hit dice. Really nothing special to it. For each of them, he gives them hit dice, armor class, bite, and disease chance, and then maybe some special notes. So there's like a cursed rat that has a chance, if you don't save versus poison, you can end up becoming blind. The horned rat can gore you. The fire rat is fire resistant. The Gorgo rat has a tail that can smack you like a cockatrice and maybe petrify you. A water rat that can swim really fast. The Mexican rat, and I don't know if this is a reference to Speedy Gonzales or not, but it can haste itself for 1 turn a day. That's where I thought they might have got the inspiration. Otherwise, I'm not really sure why the Mexican rat can go faster. The night rat can cast darkness as an illusionist for 1 turn. The vampire rat can assume gaseous form and regenerate 1 hit point per round, and the bites cause bleeding, an extra 1 hit point every round until someone stops and binds those wounds or a cure wound spell is applied. I like that one. The manticore rat. It can fly like a manticore and has little spikes it can shoot from its tails. The gnarled rat has bark-like skin and a superior armor class. The ether rat can go ethereal. Anyway, can go into the ethereal plane. The slime rat can control nearby slimes. The lariat rat tail can behave as if it was strangleweed and wrap itself around you and hold you while it then bites you. And the cat catcher rat has 2 additional claw attacks every round, and all cats are afraid of the cat catcher rat. And then finally you have the king rat, who has 8 hit dice and can summon 10 to 100 giant rats at will. He's not the last one. So there's the elephant rat, or elephant. Attacks as if he was an elephant. It's 11 hit dice and has an elephant's head on top of a rat's body. So the body's got to be pretty big or the elephant's head is really small. And then Rat of the Mountain is a 16 hit dice creature, and they're just really rare. He doesn't say anything else. I think it's a really good article, both the creative modifications of some monsters and also the way he gets into the stuff with the rats. I actually think is really, really interesting, right? Because you take a simple creature like a rat, and he's like, look at just a little creativity, some tweaking. You can make these boring, common monsters really, really interesting and surprising to the characters. And I thought that's just fantastic. So A++ for that article. Next, we have a review of Janelle Jaquay's fantastic old school adventure called Dark Tower. It was put out by Judges Guild. We haven't gotten to this product yet in my Judges Guild review, but we will one day. And this one's just fantastic. And you don't need to wait for me to talk about this product. I can tell you right now, go, if you don't have it, find a copy of this. It doesn't really matter, which printing you get. Goodman Games has done reprints of this. It's just one of Jaquay's 2 classic adventures that everyone who loves old school should own a copy of Dark Tower and the Caverns of Thracia. That's my little tip to you in connection with that review. And they liked it as well. John Phillips writes an article about assassins in disguise, and here's his rules modification. At levels 1 through 3, you can disguise yourself, but really only as sort of a generic person, not like any particular actual person, right? You're not skilled enough. If you try to, you're going to be discovered by anyone who has any acquaintance with that person, just sort of, I would say, automatically. At level 4 to 6, they can become better at that. They have to go watch that person, case that person, right, for 1 to 4 days. Watch their habits, their speech patterns, listen to them talk, those kind of things. And then there's a 75% chance, there'll still be a 75% chance of discovery by anyone that really knows that person well. And so you got to be, a little careful with what you're doing, but then you could also pass for that person by people who don't know them well, right? So you got to think about how you're going to use that disguise. Once you get to 7th level, you're really becoming a master at the craft. You got to spend 2 to 16 days, so 2d8, to study the person in order to do this well. But once you've done that, your physical disguise and your behavior, you'll be able to completely fool basically anyone, no chance of failure from that point on. You might decide, well, maybe if it's his mom, right, or his spouse, or, maybe the closest of people would be able to recognize it, or you might be some slip up. I think, some chance that you don't know everything about their history or catchy phrases that they share with each other or something, inside jokes, that kind of thing. But basically, really, really good article. Then, for good order, we have a few magic items, especially for the assassin. The assassin's blade is a dagger that usually comes with 2 types of potions. One is a poison that is deadly but slow acting, and the other is a painkiller. And you would put both of these types of liquid onto your dagger, and then when you backstab somebody, you would inject the poison. The painkiller would keep them from knowing that they've been stabbed, in theory. And then, they're still going to bleed, so other people might notice, but apparently you wouldn't feel the stab, is the idea. And then that poison won't affect the assassin, will be long gone, before the poison kicks in and kills you. Next is the fake scroll used for an assassin who wants to pretend to be a magic user. It's a scroll that has writing on it, usually in Thieves' Cant, and it will vanish as red. It doesn't actually obviously create a spell effect. And finally, the enchanted flask of poison. It's normally full of pure water. There's a code word or a special word in Thieves' Cant written on there. If you use the activating word, it'll change pure water into poison and then back into pure water. So you could, have that. Someone could see it, drink it. It's just water. You get to where you need it, change it to poison, use it, change it back to water. So if anybody finds you later, you won't have any poison in your possession. It's a fantastically creative item, which will obviously be extremely sought after by any kind of an assassin. So good job for John. All right, and then Ian Hamilton has the dungeon. Almost, I think every issue has had if I understand, Guy Duke did the dungeons, which is, if you think 11 months in a row, guys turned out really good dungeons for the Beholder. So for once, he does not do that. This is Death Test by Ian Hamilton. Here's our map. And he said this is really part of a larger, I guess you say, dungeon adventure. You see this is sideways, so the bottom's south and the top's north. And up at the top, there are stairs that say up to the castle. And this is the castle of a count who happens to be a vampire. And you're coming in. Recently has been discovered this underground entrance, and you've been challenged to go in there and root it out and seek for treasure, right? Unknowns to you, there's a whole castle on top of this where the count lives. And I think it's pretty well done. I like the dungeon drawing itself. It's got, all kinds of traps, secret doors, magical entrances, teleport zones, a lot of interesting stuff. It's not quite a sort of zoo menagerie dungeon. I mean, everything sort of makes sense, although not completely. Like there's a dragon in here that's being fed, young maidens and some other stuff that doesn't really make sense why these things are all sort of co-located together. But most of it hangs together pretty well. This is definitely going to be there's a decent amount of combat. So this is definitely going to be a pretty long, multi-hour. You might get through it in one evening if you guys could stick around and play for, maybe 5 hours or so. And it's pretty decent. Again, I think most of these things, the joy of it is somebody else's creative product. You can read it, you can understand it, and then your players can go through something completely different. And because it's not your DM, there's going to be slightly different flavor to it, different ideas and how they set things up with traps and so forth, right, than what your normal DM might do. So it's a nice change of pace, I think, for the players. So again, I give this one a thumbs up. Info's really short. I always like to share these just because of the clubs that are in here. And we have the Fair Dungeon Club that's playing D&D, and the Circle Battle Group Board and War Games Club, which has an annual one-day show called Games Galore. So I thought those things were pretty cool. Article on Traveler. I don't play Traveler, but this is some things you might want to have in your ship. An emergency escape capsule, which makes a lot of sense. And then he mentions, in D&D, you have multiple motivators. You want gold, you want experience points, you want magic items. He said, but in Traveler, really all you want is money and more money. And so he says, you can really fill that void with alien artifacts, right, which take the place of magical items. And surely somebody would want those, whether you want to use them or you want to sell them for more money. But they would be the kind of things you would probably want to go after. Here's some ideas. The Paradox Crystal, a telepathic communicator. Psychics can use it. Maybe even non-psychics can manage to do it without going insane. Star tongues, golden star-shaped objects attached to your forehead will stick in and allow you to communicate with intelligent creatures, even though you don't speak the same language. The Kai staff. 4-foot-long staff, 3-foot-long handle with a 1-foot-long glowing blue metal. Touch it to an oxygen-breathing creature, and it has to make some type of a saving throw or become paralyzed. And the Zero Stone attaches to a power plant and increases the drive, like the space drive, right, by 50%. So it superpowers your spaceship. And then the Suicide Pod, an information storage unit, can hold an immense amount of data. So I think the idea is you can put all the data in there and launch this pod away if you need to blow up your spaceship for some reason, like you're going to get boarded or blown up. At least don't lose your knowledge. And then finally, I think this would be Mike Stoner's article, There's No Attribution Given. This is developing the campaign. Remember, he had the first article with this title, which talked about his magic users' colleges. And now he's saying laying the trail, and he's talking about creating wilderness adventures. And where's he saying here? Believe me, a good wilderness far surpasses the best of dungeons. So there's Mike's view of this. And I think, in fairness, if you're a good DM, some good outside campaigns are a must. Here are a few ideas. The Elven Talon Village, something like Lothlorien. Obviously, he says here they're guarding a magic pool and they're not going to be welcoming to outsiders. The basin set up in the mountains, which he said would have an ancient Aztec or Inca type civilization in it. And with all the cool things that go, with that type of a civilization. A long barrow situated on open moorland, raided by some ogres and trolls who've broken into a few of the tombs and made that their sort of home base. And then, of course, there are other burrows around there, that grave mounds, right, that have not been opened. So you can get in all kinds of typical D&D stuff right there. A mangrove swamp on a tropical river delta. The overhead canopy is so thick it's almost like total darkness in there most of the time. You've got piranhas in the water, blood-sucking leeches, electrical eels. It's really hard to stay out of the water, so that's going to be a real problem for your party's movement rate. And then don't forget to add in things like mosquitoes and other bugs that constantly harass and probably give negative modifiers to the characters, not to mention the diseases they can get. And finally, he loves to throw in a swamp-living dinosaur, tree-living constrictor snakes, and patches of quicksand to keep them on their toes. An isolated monastery, self-supporting, and he said this could be, sort of lawful good tendencies with things like Kirens as protectors or guardians, or it could be an evil monastery for evil, evil clerics with things like gargoyles and hellhounds. So you could take that sort of in either direction. And personal twist, I'm a big fan of the deeper layer to the onion, where you would have something and maybe everything looks really nice, and that conceals obviously something really sinister that happens maybe on the under levels of the monastery, right? So they welcome you with open arms and they're all nice and this looks like these are all good people, but in fact underneath they're probably lawful evil, and either they're going to manipulate you, kill you, or just hide that fact from you, right? Something to come around later in the campaign. So like that idea quite a lot. And finally, we've got the gold panning settlement. People that are near, like taking from the gold explosion in the U.S. back in the 1800s. And this one, he shows you like how I'd flush out that one sentence idea. And he just says, look, this guy made this. We have a prospector who made a great discovery. Sort of a gold rush was on. Little towns pops up. He draws out his town. He says, I'm going to flush that out by telling you, about the inn, 2-story building where you can get your rooms, who's commonly there, owner of the inn. We've got the general store, which basically doesn't sell magic items or adventuring equipment. They sell mining equipment, right? But so you can get food, oil, picks. There's a guy owns a stable, so you can buy mules, maybe dogs. And then a couple other people here, the moneylender, who's the rich guy, and then a couple other just random people who live in the town. And that's how he, says that's just all the detail you need. It only took me one page to sort of flesh that out in greater detail, and now you're ready for your campaign to show up there in adventure. There's the back page, typical stuff, and that is our look at the Beholder number 12 from March of 1980. Hope you all enjoyed today's video. Hope you are enjoying the series, and I hope you're subscribed. If you have friends who might enjoy our content, please send them our way, and hopefully they will be part of the community as well. Have a great Friday. Till next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.